Hi, my name's Charlie. I run the Backseat Fighter Podcast. Please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And comment down below when you subscribed, and I'll be responding to you in the comments over there. Thank you so much for watching. I really, really appreciate it. Please enjoy episode 10 of the Backseat Fighter Podcast. Welcome to episode 10 of the Backseat Fighter Podcast. Get yourself a coffee, get yourself some popcorn. I'm sipping on an iced latte because today we have an amazing show for all you guys watching and listening on Spotify. We're going to go through a discussion. We're going to talk about weight cutting, missing weight. Does that actually provide an advantage? And we're going to go through examples because I believe it's more of a nuanced discussion than people realize. And then obviously we're going to go and do the predictions for this weekend's UFC Fight Night in Tampa, the main event between Colby, Covington and Joaquin, Buckley. I'm going to go through all the rest of the fights on the big card there. And let's just get straight into the episode, my friends. Right, here we go. Discussion about missing weight. Now, I really got quite upset and angry. And, I was very passionate about my discussion last week in episode 9 about Bryan Battle missing weight against Randy Brown. Obviously, in that fight, Bryan Battle comes out with the decision on the judges' scorecards in what realistically was a very close fight, right? Not much happened other than a lot of clinching against the fence. It kind of reminded me, as I spoke about, of the Mario Bautista versus Jose Aldo fight, right? And I believe that Randy Brown did more damage outside of those clinch exchanges and, thoroughly deserved the win, in my opinion. Now, the judges gave the nod to Bryan Battle, and I can understand-ish how they got there. I really feel like Randy Brown should have won, but I understand what the judges saw that could have justified in their minds a Bryan Battle victory. But for people who don't know, Bryan Battle missed weight by 4 pounds. He wasn't close at all to making weight at welterweight, which I believe for a non-title fight is 171 pounds. I think he weighed in at 175. And Randy Brown, his opponent, did make weight. Now, this is where we get into a very nuanced and detailed discussion about the advantage of not getting down to the weight limit, not getting down, not cutting those extra pounds, going through that extra suffering. We spoke a little bit about that in the previous episode, but here, somebody kind of spoke to me about this and I was thinking about it on my own. Does it actually provide an advantage? So I wanted to have a look at the data, have a look at the statistics. Now, what I found out was that only 44% of fighters who miss weight and go on to fight actually win. And that means 56% of fighters who miss weight, go on to still fight, lose. So then you would say, well, technically then it's a disadvantage if most of the people that miss weight end up losing their fight. Now, that's where it needs to be more nuanced and there's context to each fight. Now, I can't speak about every fight that I've looked at, but what I have done is gone on betmma.tips and they have a great database of about, I think it's a few hundred fights at least of, people who've missed weight in their fights and if they've gone on to win or not and, kind of the method of winning and stuff like that. But let's talk a bit about this Bryan Battle versus Randy Brown case in comparison with some other ones and why I do believe that it's a really big issue that Bryan Battle got that win and why I believe he really won that fight because he had the advantage of not cutting those extra pounds and going through those extra little moments of suffering. So in that Bryan Battle fight, obviously, I believe that, he had a full training camp. He had time to get down to that weight and wasn't able to do so. Didn't enact the discipline, training, diet, whatever the reasons was. Maybe he had injuries or personal problems. That's why I don't want to go too hard on that side of things. But at the same time, there has been a wealth of professionals over the history of mixed martial arts, boxing, wrestling, any sport that involves weight cutting that have had things going on and still were able to make the weight. So the standard, the professionalism has to be at the highest level in this case. And, there's other examples of and the reason I'm very focused on this Bryan Battle fight is because the way he fought that fight. He didn't go out there and do a lot of damage to Randy Brown. He literally was able to hold Randy Brown on the cage. And the way we saw the fight play out was because he missed weight, in my opinion. And I don't believe he would have been able to fight that way for those 3 rounds if he had gotten down all the way to the agreed weight limit. I think Randy Brown would have been able to push hard. I think Randy Brown would have been able to maybe get off the cage easier. These are all nuances that only fighters would know. Now, this has happened in other cases where the fighter who has missed weight has gone on to win the fight, and in more devastating circumstances than the Randy Brown Bryan Battle fight. I think of Figgy versus Benavidez. When Figueiredo missed weight, I believe he got him by a knockout or submission, I believe. I remember that Ryan Spann Dominic Reyes fight. Dominic Reyes just came off a great win against Anthony Smith. But if you don't remember before his fight against Dustin Jacoby, Anthony Reyes fought Ryan Spann and got brutally knocked out. And Ryan Spann was the one who missed weight. So it begs the question, right? What are we really looking at? I think people can say, well, 56% of fighters who miss weight go on to lose. But are we talking about fighters who have had, the 8 to 10 to 12 week training camp time of preparation to get their bodies in shape, to get their dieting, to get their weight low enough through training camp so that when it comes to fight week, they're only cutting a small amount of water? Or are they really water loading and they're doing it in a different way, where they're coming into fight week heavy, but they've water loaded, they're really full of water. So all they're really cutting is that water weight off their bodies, and that's how they do their cuts. Regardless of the way in which you decide to get down to that weight, as a professional fighter, especially in the UFC, especially for people like, Bryan Battle, who are, going to the top of the division, but very popular fighter. This is a huge opportunity for both of these guys. They've got to make weight, correct? But when you're talking about missing weight, and then you can say, well, yeah, of course we're not. Let me get back to the point. It's different when you have all of that time to prepare. Then, for example, if you're James Jontop coming in to fight Mauricio Rufy on short notice, obviously you're not going to make weight. You're going to miss it by 20 pounds because you've been called 2 weeks ago or a week ago or 3 days ago or whatever the time frame is. That's a really short notice. And obviously you don't have time to either have a proper training camp, even, get prepared. Maybe you weren't in the gym that much, but you're taking a big opportunity, and the UFC probably understands that you're not going to make the weight. But then obviously James Jontop goes on to lose against Mauricio Rufy in an incredible effort by Jontop regardless. And Rufy looked very good in that fight, and the rightful person in terms of preparation, in terms of getting down to the weight, professionalism, was able to win the fight. But that doesn't mean, for example, then, that people like Bryan Battle, who definitely had the amount of time necessary to make the weight, that it wasn't an advantage for them, even because some people who missed weight lost. What I really think about is the fact that when we're talking about fighters missing weight and not having to cut the extra pounds like Bryan Battle, we're talking about another level, another layer of danger that gets added to an already extremely dangerous sport. Fighters risk it all in there. Now, in UFC history, I don't believe we've had any deaths. I don't believe we've had anyone die in the octagon, thank God, and may that last. But when you've got a guy who's depleted himself, drained all the water out of his body, hasn't had the time to rehydrate himself properly so that the barrier, the kind of the liquid that goes around the brain, which is created through water in the body that protects you from punches, that is able to give you extra protection against big shots and knockout blows, but the other guy hasn't had to go through that. That's what I think about. That's what I think about the extra danger. That's when I think about the Ryan Spann versus Dominic Reyes. Dominic Reyes had already come off, I think 3 losses at that point. This was his Ryan Spann and Dominic Reyes' fight was Reyes' fourth defeat in a row, excuse me for butchering that sentence. That was his 4th defeat in a row. And not only was that a huge consequence to Dominic Reyes' career in that point, but also his health. He got brutally knocked out. His lights out cold. And guys, I get it. I love the entertainment. I love the knockouts. I love the high risk element of this sport. It's what makes it the most incredible sport in the world. But at the end of the day, these are people who have families, who have kids, who have wives, who have parents, who have people they have to take care of, who have lives outside of fighting that they need to be able to continue to do after they're done with this incredible sport and incredible journey they're on. So when other people miss weight and come out with a win, it does sometimes leave a sour taste in my mouth, just because, a lot of these fighters put everything they have into these fight camps. Now, Am I condemning Bryan Battle for the rest of his career because he missed weight against Randy Brown? No. But this also is not the first time that Bryan Battle has missed weight, if I believe so. He also missed weight, I believe, against Gabriel Green, and also came out on top in that fight, right? By knockout. So we're talking about an extra level of danger, an extra level of risk. Now, a counter argument might be, well, Randy Brown gets 20% of Bryan Battle's purse, right? He gets some of the money that Bryan Battle should have made, and that's the penalty for missing weight. There's two things about that. Okay, fine. Randy Brown agrees to fight him so that he kind of assumes that risk. He assumes that disadvantage, and he gets some sort of compensation for taking on this extra risk, right? Well, there's two things there. Randy Brown doesn't have a choice in that moment. Randy Brown has probably put, 10 to 12 weeks into a training camp, has put a lot of money into his fight camp. He's got to pay his coaches. He's got to pay his agent. He's got to pay his nutritionist. He's got to pay for all of his recovery and rest, his S&C coaches, right? Everything that he also already has to pay. He needs that paycheck as well. He needs to fight. Regardless of the extra 20% he's getting from Bryan Battle, he still needs to get his show and win money. The other part of it is that Bryan Battle and that fight was a huge opportunity for both of these guys to get higher up in the division. So you're never going to be able to convince, in my opinion, at least a lot of the time, especially for up-and-coming guys who really need the fight, not only for the money, but for the W on the record, for the ranking, for the progression in their career. You're really put between a rock and a hard place. And, regardless, and I need to go back to this, regardless of the fact that Bryan Battle missed weight, I still believe that Randy Brown deserved the decision on the judges' scorecards. And there were a couple decisions on that night, especially that Volkov versus Gane fight that was pretty ridiculous in terms of the judges. They gave the nod to Cyril Gane when a lot of people, including UFC President Dana White, believed Volkov should have won. That's how I feel, and I also believe that's how they feel with this Randy Brown fight. They believe that Randy Brown deserved the W. But at the end of the day, guys, what is my show really dedicated to? What is this podcast all about? This podcast is about uplifting these incredible fighters. I don't ever want to be negative about someone like Bryan Battle. I don't ever want to even have to, criticize one of my favorite fighters of all time, probably my top three, maybe my favorite fighter of all time, Charles Oliveira, who early in his career missed weight and still got wins that way. But at the end of the day, I just care about fighter health because these people are very special. It's not a basketball player who I love. I love basketball. I play basketball myself. It's not a basketball player, having a bad game and, having a bad game and scoring 10 points when they average 30, but they have that redemption game the next two nights to go back to their home arena, drop 30 and 10 and everything is good again. No, Randy Brown, in this case, right? He goes into this fight. It's all the marbles. He's putting everything on the line. His reputation, his health, his financial stability, everything goes into this, right? For then Bryan Battle to miss weight, get the decision victory because of the way he was able to fight due to the fact that he had those extra 4 pounds that he didn't have to cut. Now what? When does Randy Brown fight again? Who knows what injuries he was carrying into this fight and still had to make the weight? Does he fight in 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, a year? And that's all about, when is he going to be able to get paid again? When is he going to be able to provide for his family again? So for me, it's a bigger discussion than the fact that, he just missed weight. And you know what? 56% of fighters who miss weight and still go on to fight lose anyway. No. A lot of the times, if a fighter has missed weight and then gone into a fight, it's because they've been, notified at short notice. They were a replacement fight for somebody else. And a lot of the times, or at least from my experience, and listen, I'm a backseat fighter, right? That's the name of this podcast. I don't have insight necessarily into the life of a fighter, into what it takes to cut weight. I've never cut weight. I haven't gone through that suffering, that pressure. I know. Trust me. And we spoke a lot about Khamzat, I've been on Khamzat's side because he was going through illnesses, that he wasn't able to make weight, that we need to be more humanized. We need to be more forgiving for these fighters, right? Which is fair enough. I do believe that as well. But even on the broadcast, Daniel Cormier had little to no sympathy for Bryan Battle, in my opinion. He was like, Randy Brown had to cut these extra pounds, Bryan Battle didn't. It's not fair. So take it from the simultaneous light heavyweight and heavyweight champion of the world in the UFC at one point, one of the only people to hold 2 belts simultaneously in the UFC. Don't take it from me if you don't want to, but it is an advantage, no doubt, especially in that fight, in my opinion, and has been throughout many fights in history. But you know what? Let me know what you guys think. I'm sure there's a lot more examples that I haven't got to. Obviously, Joel Romero, I think he still lost those fights even when he missed weight against Robert Whittaker. But please let me know if you guys have any, more examples, or what you think. Maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you think it isn't an advantage. Maybe you think Bryan Battle was, totally okay to react kind of trollingly, to not really care. The only thing I will add is that Bryan Battle came onto Ariel Helwani's show and said, if Randy Brown had missed weight and I had made weight, I wouldn't have taken the fight. So even Bryan Battle knows himself that it was a huge advantage. And he said, yeah, I felt bad for Randy. Something to this effect, I'm paraphrasing. I felt bad for Randy Brown until he took 20% of my purse. And then at that point, I didn't care, whatever. So I think there's a lack of sportsmanship from Bryan Battle in that sense. But it also is playing into his character, especially after he got that huge win in France. So then come to this fight. And it's a little bit of controversy. And to be honest with you, if I'm his manager, or if I'm his agent, or if I'm his representatives, I say lean into this. This is getting you attention. This is getting you views. This is getting you popularity, or it's getting you talked about in the media at least. Keep going. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think missing weight is an advantage, especially in this case with Bryan Battle and Randy Brown? And let me know any huge examples that I missed out in this segment of the video of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening on Spotify, and thank you so much for watching on YouTube up to this point. Let's get in. Let's get in to the predictions for this weekend's UFC Fight Night on ESPN in Tampa. And the main event is Colby Covington versus Joaquin Buckley. Now, this is a huge fight for many reasons. If people don't know, Colby Covington hasn't been that active. I think he's coming off that loss against Leon Edwards in that, championship fight where he kind of underwhelmed, to be honest with you. And of course, Joaquin Buckley was supposed to be fighting Ian Machado, Gary, this weekend instead of Colby Covington. But obviously, Bilal Muhammad falls out of the world title fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov. Ian Machado, Gary steps up for that fight. So a short notice fight for Colby Covington. And that's a very interesting idea, because this is a Colby Covington who sat out 2 years after beating Jorge Masvidal to fight Leon Edwards for the championship of the world. And a guy who has managed his career so meticulously and intelligently, in my opinion. If you really think about it, I'm going to get into Colby Covington right now. This is a guy who's 36 years old. He's probably been to the top of the mountain in terms of what most fighters could ever expect for their career. He was interim champion at one point, obviously fought for the belt 3 times, lost 3 times, 2 times to Kamaru Usman and 1 time to Leon Edwards. But if you really think about his last 6 fights, he's 3-3, right? There's 2 losses to Usman, 1 to Leon, but he beat in that time, I believe, Tyron Woodley, Robbie Lawler, Jorge Masvidal. And that's what I mean when he say he's managed his career very intelligently and meticulously. He was able to fight guys who you could consider over the hill, not in their prime, in terms of Tyron Woodley. At one point was almost considered the best 170-pounder of all time. Almost, I never said he was, don't get on me. Robbie Lawler, former champion, big name, was able to get him pretty much over the hump and really just put that Colby Covington chaos pace on him. Just absolute cardio machine that Colby Covington is. Excuse me. And obviously get Masvidal when Masvidal was kind of towards the end of his career, although he is making a comeback, which I'm excited for, but I don't know if it's necessarily advisable. But when I say he's managed his career meticulously, he was able to fight guys that won in their prime and still get title shots off of it. He was able to wait out 2 years and come back to another title shot, right? So this is a guy who you wouldn't expect to necessarily take a short notice fight against a young up-and-coming Joaquin Buckley, an absolute killer, a guy who's on a 5-fight win streak. And we'll get to Joaquin Buckley in a second. But I believe that Colby probably feels like he needs a win back on his record and feels like if I can beat this Joaquin Buckley, I can get myself back into the top names of the division. And maybe, although everybody probably counting him out of getting another title shot because he's had 3 and he's lost all 3. Maybe if he can get this win and then stack it up with another big win after this fight, he can maybe get himself back into the title picture in some way or another. But when you're talking about Colby Covington, you're talking about an incredible fighter, especially in his prime, which is the debate, is he still in his prime? You know, he's known for an incredible gas tank. You think about that Robbie Lawler fight, the pace he put on Robbie Lawler. You think about the pace of that first Usman fight. I think that was in New York, if I'm not mistaken. And I went to that pre-fight press conference and the energy, the evil things that, you know, Colby Covington says at press conferences. We know it's a character, but does that still make it less wrong to do so? That's up for debate as well. He's a very controversial figure and a lot of things to debate about him. But yes, unlimited cardio, insane wrestling pedigree, and he developed this striking style that wasn't the most polished in terms of technique, throwing the punches straight, turning your punches over. You know, it isn't necessarily what you would teach, but it's an incredibly effective style, volume, overwhelming, just puts you on your back foot. And that's why people are a little bit surprised in that Leon Edwards fight, because he gets the championship shot after 2 years, and it really did look like he was uncomfortable in there. Now, a lot of credit goes to Leon Edwards. He's an absolute sniper on the feet, as we know. Headshot dead. But at the same time, Colby Covington didn't look to implement his game plan at all. Put pressure on you, wrestle you, push the pace, throw a lot of punches, increase the volume, make you think the entire time, make you uncomfortable in there. And I wrote down on my card here, breaking the fourth wall, Leon Edwards' fight may have been the death of Colby Covington, the elite fighter. And, you know, I'm just going to put that here if you can see it. And I think for me, what I notice, and this might be, you know, hindsight, or it might be conspiracy, or it might be, you know, just plain out wrong and delusional. But I really believe that when Colby Covington made that heinous comment about Leon Edwards' dad in the pre-fight press conference, if people don't know, Leon Edwards' dad unfortunately passed away, was, believe murdered when Leon Edwards was a young boy, which is tragic, and I don't love bringing it up. And condolences still to Leon Edwards and his family for that. But Colby Covington insinuated that he was going to, in a way, kill Leon Edwards in the octagon, and that he would join his father in hell. Now, it was an egregious, terrible comment that clearly got to Leon Edwards, and justifiably so. But then, you know, after that, he comes into the fight after making such a horrible comment and doesn't back it up with any sort of fighting intensity, or looks like just will to win and get the belt, you know? And obviously after that fight, I think you can see he whispers in Leon Edwards' ear, like it was just for business, like he did with Kamaru as well. But at the end of the day, I think that's a step too far, even for a character being played. Now, that's a great transition, because Joaquin Buckley, his opponent this weekend, actually trained with him before at MMA Masters, the gym that Colby Covington is at. Now, the interesting part about this was that at the time, Joaquin Buckley was in the division above, at middleweight, at 185 pounds. These guys are fighting at 170 pounds. So Colby Covington was like, yeah, Joaquin Buckley, come train. And Joaquin Buckley, in his pre-fight press conferences, has referenced that he knows the normal Colby Covington. He knows he's a normal guy. And so he spent time with him when Colby Covington was not in this incredibly obnoxious, controversial, MAGA, loves Trump, you know, basically criticizing and shitting on everybody character. So he knows, like, he knows the real person. So this Colby Covington character that he's come back into with the pre-fight press conference, talking about everybody, Colby hasn't even gone at Joaquin Buckley because he knows it's not going to work. Joaquin has seen the real him. Joaquin knows it's fake. Joaquin knows exactly what he's trying to bring to the table. And it's not going to face Joaquin. So I believe that's why Colby hasn't come in with this character. And I believe that gives him mental edge to Buckley in this fight, especially considering that Buckley is on a 5-fight win streak. He just coming off of that incredible knockout of Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. We know how good Wonderboy is on the feet, even now at 41 or 42 years old. Still an incredible karate fighter and kickboxer. And the thing is, like, I just believe that Joaquin Buckley has developed so much as a mixed martial artist. Obviously, he was at middleweight. He's made that move down. I think on the Believe You Me podcast, he said that the reason for moving down was that he was just tired of getting knocked the fuck out. And to be honest with you, it makes sense, man, because he's not the biggest guy. I mean, he's huge, he's wide, he's muscly, he's athletic, but he's not that tall. I think he's like 5'8" or 5'9", right? So for him to be now on a 5-fight win streak in his back to 170 division, obviously that KO of Wonderboy, that immense KO of Luke, we know how tough Luke is. Luke just shocked the world again against Temba Garimbo, said that he's still here, and kind of just proves how good Joaquin Buckley is in that sense. But what impressed me the most, I believe, in this 5-fight win streak, or at least in this year, was his fight against Nursultan Ruziboyev. Because in that fight, Ruziboyev was a huge 6'5" welterweight, really big height difference. And Joaquin Buckley had to use his IQ, his ability to crash the void, get across the distance, make the fight a bit uglier than you would expect from someone like Joaquin Buckley, who has probably one of the greatest knockouts in history, when he was able to kind of throw the kick, he got caught, he spins, wheel kicks his opponent, knocks him out cold. But what I want to say is that, before I just get quickly into that Ruziboyev fight, is that Joaquin Buckley has had 3 fights already this year. This is his 4th fight. He's staying active, he's in shape, he's got the momentum, he's got this new mojo, and I think he's just got a new control of his career. I think he's curated his training methods that suit him. I believe he doesn't have necessarily a home gym. I believe he goes around, he gains knowledge. I think that was similar to Ian Machado Gary before Machado Gary found Shoot the Box. And, you know, this is a really, really new, evolved Joaquin Buckley. Now, the reason I mentioned that Ruziboyev fight was because it showed, obviously, the things we already know. The KO power, his ability to drop Ruziboyev. It showed his explosivity. And, you know, I just really believe that it showed his IQ, in my opinion, because he was able to mix in the takedowns, showed his ground and pound abilities, step in and southpaw, land the left, close the distance. And I just believed it showed his development as a mixed martial artist. In that 3rd round in that Ruziboyev fight, I believe he dropped him 2 times with heavy shots. And we know he's got knockout power. You know, even in that Ruziboyev fight, although he didn't get the finish, look at the Luque fight. Look at the Wonderboy fight. Look at that spinning wheel kick. One of the best highlights I've ever seen in mixed martial arts history. So this is a guy that I really believes he's going to come in and win this fight. And Colby Covington, the question looms over him like a grey cloud in the sky. Is he really still Colby Covington? Is he still Chaos Covington? Is he still able to push that pace? Because in that Leon Edwards fight, it didn't look like so. And for him to take this fight on short notice, you know, was he training? Was he in the best shape of his career? Why did he take this fight? What are his motivations? Is it financial? Is it pressure from the UFC? Is it pressure from outside factors in his life? You know, what's going on? So there's still a lot of questions that Colby Covington needs to answer. And, you know, it's a hard fight to predict. But if I must, I'm going to go with Joaquin Buckley to win this fight. Now, I do believe that Colby Covington has avenues to win this fight if he can get the takedowns, if he can apply the pressure like he did in his prime. But Joaquin Buckley has all the momentum. 4th fight this year, 5-fight win streak, knockout power, shown ability to ground and pound, go to the ground, to close distance, to put the pressure on himself. And obviously, if he can make sure that Colby Covington feels his power early on, and I believe this is a 5-round fight. So, you know, that does favor Colby, right? More time to wear out Joaquin Buckley. But Joaquin is always in great shape. He's very disciplined. But we'll see. I'm very excited for this fight, but I am going to go for Joaquin Buckley. I'm probably by decision or... No, I'll go by... Jesus. Okay, I'll go by decision. It was a tough choice, but I'm going to go by decision. And let me know what you guys think in the comments. And if you comment what you think for this main event, I'll respond and we'll have a little debate. Thank you so much. Let's get on to the next fight I want to talk about. Now, we're not going to go straight to the co-main event. As you guys know about this podcast, we kind of jump around depending on what fights I really I'm interested in seeing. But this is a special fight to me because I will probably be interviewing Tuco Tokkos, who is fighting Navajo Stirling to open up the main card here in Tampa. Now, Tuco Tokkos, absolute veteran in the game, 10-4. He's from London, but I believe he's been in Florida for about 7 to 8 years, training at Kill Cliff. If people don't know, that's where Gilbert Burns trains. Shavkat Rakhmonov, Kamaru Usman's been there. I'm missing a couple of names for no reason right now. I know Ian Machado Gary used to train there. Vicente Luque, for example. All top fighters. And this is a light heavyweight fight. So these are some big boys. But Tuco, yeah, from London. And he's 3-1 in his last 4. Now, unfortunately, Tuco is a Chelsea fan. I'm an Arsenal fan. I saw him wearing a Chelsea shirt in a post-fight celebration thing in the octagon. But Tuco, 3-1 in his last 4, is a very well-rounded fighter. If I believe it was a fight against a guy called Myron Dennis, he slammed him down and won the fight by breaking the guy's arm on the slam. And this is a guy who has appeared in the UFC before. He was on the Dana White Contender Series. Oh, no, sorry, Road to UFC series, where Zhang Mingyang was able to, get the finish, unfortunately, for Tuco, and came out last time on the poor side of a fight again, with Umar Sy able to get him by submission. But the thing about Tuco, especially in that Umar Sy fight, was that he looked comfortable. Now, Umar Sy was able to drag him to the ground, get the takedown. But I remember in that fight that Tuco looked very comfortable, even when Umar Sy had his back. I know he was talking to his corner. I heard it on the video. He goes, he's breathing very heavy. So he was comfortable. He thought he was going to get out of that situation. And I believe maybe it was just a lapse of concentration that cost him in that fight. Similar to, how elite fighters like Izzy Adesanya against Dricus du Plessis in that huge main event for the middleweight championship of the world kind of lost that focus for 1 second and was doing really well in that fight and ended up, getting choked out. I think it was very similar in terms of the mental concentration side of it. But this is a guy who has got knockouts on his resume, who can take you to the ground and pound you to death, to be honest with you. And I'm just very excited to see him make his return, make a stamp in the UFC octagon. I've seen his fight against Brian Jackson, which, he had to kind of reset after his road to the UFC performance against Zhang Mingyang. And what did he do? He went on a 3-fight win streak outside the UFC and came back and was able to debut in the UFC against Umar Sy. Now, he didn't take any damage in that Umar Sy fight. So he's coming into this fight, in terms of in the cage, in octagon time damage, very well. He's coming in unscathed in that sense. Now, I don't know. I haven't spoken to Tuco about his training camp, about what he's coming into with this fight. But he is going up against a very big challenge and a very big prospect coming into the UFC, Navajo Stirling. Now, this is a guy who is a monster. He looks scary. He's got the image of an absolute champion. He's got the blonde hair, ripped to the gills. And, he's part of that city kickboxing setup with Izzy Adesanya, with Dan Hooker, with Kai Kara France. And this is a guy who, before I've even seen his fights, to be honest with you, I heard his name from Izzy Adesanya in his interviews talking about the preparation, the challenges in the gym that Navajo Stirling offers him in terms of sparring, in terms of, getting ready, the not wars in the gym, because I don't know if they're going that hard in sparring. I imagine they are, to be honest with you. But really an incredible fighter, to be honest with you. And listen, he did an interview on Freestyle Bender, great channel, great inspiration for me, what David Adesanya is doing over there at Freestyle Bender. His interview style, his ability to kind of create these visual documentary-like videos of when Izzy goes to the fighters or when Izzy's in training camp, really huge inspiration. And just want to say that on video, on podcasts, on audio. He did an interview with Navajo Stirling, and I thought it was a great question. He asked Navajo to explain his fighting style. And I wrote down a few things he said. He said, cerebral, shot selective, and hit with intention. Now, my favorite about that is hit with intention, because if you watch a Navajo Stirling fight, and I've watched a few, like his Dana White Contender Series matchup against Latu, oh my goodness. That check left hook that he landed, that one-shot knockout, was a hit with intention, and bad intention at that. You know, this is a guy who is a king of the ring, 2-time champion. If you guys don't know King of the Ring, I think it's a kickboxing event where you have to basically do an 8-man tournament and you fight 3 times in one night. He won that 2 times. Incredible. And I think I saw him fight a guy called Stu Dave. And he was just absolutely technical in that fight. You know, a spinning back kick to the liver. The heel lands right on to that liver. It was just a gruesome shot. But Stu Dave didn't go down. Fair play to him. But then you just see the pressure pile on and you see the size of Navajo Stirling, but also the IQ. I mean, he was able to get the wrist control, grab his wrist, throw the knees, throw the elbows off the wrist control. Just a really elite striker, if I'm honest with you. And his story is so, so cool. You know, he grew up in Wellington, New Zealand, where there wasn't a lot of opportunities in terms of MMA gyms nearby to become a professional fighter. So this is a guy at 27 years old, has had to work very, very hard to get where he is, and now he's an undefeated fighter, fighting a veteran MMA fighter in Tuco, Tokkos. And I don't know how this fight is going to play out. Huge, huge test for Navajo and a huge opportunity for Tuco from London to get this job done. But I just really wanted to touch on that fight and see if Tuco can stop the hype train and see if Navajo can establish himself inside the UFC against a great opponent in Tuco. But damn, what a fight. Let me take a sip of this iced latte. Damn, it's nice. What a great episode we have today already. I'm loving it. So let's get in to the next fight I want to talk about. Now, this is probably what I think is going to be fight of the night, in my opinion. And I would not be surprised if that is the case, because what you have here is Manel Kape versus Bruno Silva in the flyweight division. Now, Manel Kape, let's start with him. This is a guy who is an elite fighter, in my opinion. Now, his record is 19-7. That doesn't scream out to you in terms of, you know, elite fighters as one of the best records. But just watch his fights. He's only lost to really elite guys, in my opinion. You know, Makayev, Kyoji Horiguchi, Kaya Sakura one time, I believe, but he's also beat Kaya Sakura. I think he's also lost to Pantoja, who for me is one of the greatest fighters I've ever seen and definitely deserves to be higher than number 9 on the pound for pound rankings. I mean, that is ridiculous. Come on, what are we doing? Put Pantoja higher up on that list. Let me get back to focus. You know, Manel Kape is 4-1 in his last 5. He's training out of Extreme Couture, and you know, he's got great weapons. And one of the fights that really showed me who Manel Kape was, and I'm not talking about his post-fight speech, was his fight against Felipe dos Santos. Now, in that fight, Felipe dos Santos, I believe, was making his debut in the UFC. Manel Kape, I think, was ranked, 10 at the time. But Felipe dos Santos, what a fight he put on. What a challenge he put on against Manel Kape. But again, immense leg kick, immense left hand out of the southpaw stance, ability to switch stances in that fight, go back to orthodox. And, you know, that left hand out of the southpaw stance dropped Felipe dos Santos early. Felipe dos Santos, amazingly tough guy, able to keep going. And even in that fight, Manel Kape was throwing all types of things that he has in his arsenal, spinning elbows, the switch to the southpaw on entry. So he would be in orthodox. He would take a step with his right foot, land that left hand as he closed down the range. You know, he's just a very underrated and smart fighter. And if you guys haven't watched that fight, I really highly recommend it. One of the best fights I've definitely seen. I think it was at UFC 293, if I'm not mistaken. Please correct me on that in the comments if you know. But he showed me he's a very intelligent fighter in that fight. Not because he was able to land strikes. He was able to deal with the damage and kind of absorb it in terms of a toughness aspect. But he was kind of the one controlling when the fight got messy. And I think DC mentioned that on the broadcast. You know, he did get hit and it did get kind of violent and he did take damage, but he was the one entering the pocket. He was the one initiating those messy or dangerous exchanges. And also, I think he knew he was 2 rounds up. And I believe he was 2 rounds up on the scorecards. I believe one of the judges maybe have given Felipe dos Santos one of those first 2 rounds. But he then kind of starts looking at the clock. He speaks with his coaches. and they kind of tell him to run down the clock. And he did such a good job of just standing out of range, popping him with a jab, maybe getting into a 2-3 fight, 2-3 punch combo, and then backing out of range, backing out of the pocket, able to run down the clock and get that judge's decision. Amazing performance by him. And this is a guy who just beat the challenger for the title, has beaten the challenger for the title in Kai Asakura. I mean, in that fight, if you watch the fight, he knocked out and TKO'd Kai Asakura. Immense leg kicks, immense ability to get in the clinch, throw the knees up the middle, hit the stomach. This is a very well-rounded fighter, and a guy who unfortunately for some reason or another, whether it's been illness, injury, other things going on, has had so many cancelled fights. I think he's had 9 cancelled fights. I think he's had more cancelled fights than he has had fights in the UFC. So hopefully we do get to see him this weekend. Hopefully there's no reason for him to pull out. And I think he has missed weight a couple of times on the topic of missing weight at the start of the episode. But let's move on to his opponent in Bruno Silva. Now, this is a guy I watched fight Cody Durden. And wow, what an uppercut he landed on Cody Durden. If people don't know Cody Durden, he just fought Joshua Van this past weekend. Joshua Van put on an absolute clinic against Cody Durden. But Cody Durden is a very good veteran in this sport. And this is guy Bruno Silva, who is on a 4-fight win streak, has immense knockouts, and honestly, I just really like the way he fights. He's got great head movement, great ability to use that lead hand, that jab as a range finder, always throwing out feints to make you hesitant. And, who was it against? I forget who it was against, but he had a beautiful knee to right hand TKO, absolute killer of a shot. And this guy absolutely, knocks people out. That's why I think it's going to be fight of the night, because he has such immense ability in all aspects to finish fights. And I'm just so excited to see this fight play out, man. And coming off a 4-fight win streak and against Manel Kape, who's coming off a loss to Muhammad Makayev, I really believe that, at the end of the day, I don't know who's going to win this fight, but I am going to make a pick in a second. I think that knee to right hand was against Rodriguez, if I'm not mistaken. Again, this is a community. I'm not the smartest bulb in the shop, as Charles Barkley would say. But yeah, let me know. But if I'm honest with you, this is a difficult fight to predict for me, but I would not be surprised if the elite finishing ability, the timing, the head movement, the power, the ability to, again, do things like throw a knee, then fire a right hand straight down the pipe and put your opponent out cold. I would not be surprised if Bruno Silva would be able to come out this fight with a huge knockout win. The thing is about Manel Kape, you can have a lot of problems with him in terms of the way he acts, or, the very explosive build-up he had with Muhammad Makayev, if you're on Makayev's side, with his, obviously, foul language in his post-fight press conferences. But the one thing that you can't say about him is that he's not tough, that he's vulnerable, that he gets knocked out, that he's chinny. This is an absolute durable fighter. So I don't know exactly how this fight's going to play out, but if I had to put money on it, I would do Manel Kape by decision. And we're going to have to see. I think it's going to be a great fight of the night, but we could see a huge knockout in that fight, in my opinion. Now, next fight on the card. Vitor Petrino versus Dustin Jacoby. Now, the last time we saw Vitor Petrino, it was against Anthony Smith. And that's when we kind of thought maybe Anthony Smith, at least I, as a fan of Anthony Smith, thought maybe Anthony Smith was going to be making a return to kind of the, maybe going on a run and maybe make a ranked run in terms of getting back to sort of the top 7, top 8, top 5 of the light heavyweight division. But, that was Petrino who had come in as an undefeated fighter, who probably hadn't come in against such a good veteran like Anthony Smith, and just got caught in a very tight guillotine because Anthony Smith has a great guillotine and was able to jump it and kind of just outthunk him in that moment, if I'm honest with you. But if we're talking about Vitor Petrino, we've got to talk about the KO of Modesto Buckley. I mean, we've already mentioned one check left hook today in terms of Navajo Stirling. What an absolute beautiful check left hook. Again, that he landed on Bukauskas. And then we have to think about his performance against Bellato and the Dana White Contender Series. I mean, for me, Vitor Petrino is one hell of a fighter. And maybe people have written him off because at the time when Anthony Smith beat him, people thought Anthony Smith may have been over the hill. Not me, but a lot of people thought that, right? That was going around. But this is a guy who has beaten very good guys. I mean, he fought Tyson Pedro, beat him by unanimous decision. Admittedly, Tyson Pedro probably wasn't all in on that fight because he then retired straight after that in the octagon. But, you know, this guy's got a lot of knockouts on his record. I believe 7 knockouts. He's a finisher, and he's going to come in against an opponent in Dustin Jacoby, who most recently is coming off a brutal knockout loss to Dominic Reyes. And when you're talking about a guy like Dustin Jacoby, you're talking about a guy who unfortunately is an elite striker. Not unfortunately is an elite, sorry. Let me rephrase that. Dustin Jacoby is an elite striker, but he's unfortunately been on the wrong end of fights in, I would say, I think it's 4 of his last 5. So he's 1-4 in his last 5. He's a guy that most recently won against Enzo Chukwu. If you guys have been watching the podcast, you know I'm a huge fan of Enzo Chukwu. He actually knocked out Enzo Chukwu when Enzo Chukwu was still at light heavyweight, since Enzo Chukwu has moved up to heavyweight and has had a lot of success there. But listen, he lost to Dominic Reyes by knockout. He lost to Mennefield by decision, Mirzakhanov by unanimous decision, and Khalil Roundtree by split decision. Now, if you really look at that lineup of fighters, those are elite fighters, especially Khalil Roundtree. Enzo Chukwu, as we've seen, he's doing damage at heavyweight. Mennefield is a really good guy who was in there against Carlos Ulberg, you know. Admittedly, he lost in 13 seconds to Carlos Ulberg, but when we're talking about Carlos Ulberg, we're probably talking about, you know, a title challenger if he can win his fight in London. But, you know, what do I think is going to happen in this fight? I mean, it's very hard to say. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about Petrino and we're talking about the Bukauskas fight, a beautiful left hook, as I mentioned, in that Mirzakhanov fight, Dustin Jacoby was also getting hit with left hands. Whilst he was entering the pocket, whilst he was entering the exchanges, Mirzakhanov was able to land the left, able to land the overhand right. And I just believe that Petrino is a bit more polished, a bit more tighter on the punches than Mirzakhanov is. And I believe that if Dustin Jacoby implements his usual style of pressure, entering the range, not necessarily the most intelligently defending himself, I believe that Petrino is going to be able to land. And I'm going to go a Petrino by knockout with the left hand. Let me know what you guys think. I know it's very specific, but that's what I see. I mean, if you're ever going to put a bet on, bet responsibly. Of course, I don't want to promote, you know, gambling. If you don't have the money, never gamble. If you're not okay with losing what you're doing, and don't bet too much. And don't bet at all, really, if you don't want to. But listen, if you're going to do a specific bet, if you could ever even, I don't even know if you can even bet on left hook knockout, but that's what I'm going with, and that's my prediction for the Vitor Petroni. Jesus, I'm messing up his name. I apologize, Vitor. Vitor Petrino versus Dustin Jacoby fight. Another sip of this beautiful iced latte. Need a refresher after that. Jesus. Right. Moving on to this next fight of the night. Before we get to the co-main event, we kind of did it the other way around by accident here. We are going to talk about Adrian Yanez versus Daniel Marcos. Now, this is another fight that I think is contender for fight of the night. Because when you're talking about Adrian Yanez, this is a true knockout artist, in my opinion. I have it written down here. Knockout artist. Now, I'm just searching up his name here on the databases because I like to see what exactly we're dealing with other than just to refresh my memory. Now, this is a guy, for me, who is an absolute beast. I mean, I remember that head kick of Rodriguez up against the fence. I think it was the left high kick. Absolutely puts him out cold in round 1. He's got a great jab. I remember in that Costa fight. Wow. So Costa was landing the jab on him, blooding up his face. If you look at Yanez's face in that fight, he was getting pieced up by the jab. But what he started doing was, as soon as Costa was going to throw that jab, he would throw it at the same time. And not only was he able to land the harder jabs in those exchanges, he was able to deter Costa from even throwing that weapon anymore. And that's what I think about Yanez as a very experienced, 31 years old, lots of fights, lots of knockout performances, a very experienced, very intelligent fighter to do something as small and detailed as that many people might not realize. But the ability to just throw that jab at the same time, stop Costa throwing that effective strike. And he was also in that fighting very intelligently in his ability to throw the jab and then throw the oblique kick to the lead knee that can kind of hyperextend that knee. And as we've spoken about many times, that Robert Whittaker does, that John Jones does, that Killer Roundtree does, ability to hyperextend the knee, tear all your ligaments in that knee joint and kind of win the fight, maybe end careers, to be honest with you. But yeah, beautiful body shots even in that Costa fight. And if I think about his fight with Gustavo Lopez, where he got a knockout, and I believe that was round 3, that was just a one-shot right-hand KO that put him out cold. One of the craziest knockouts I've seen, especially at 135 pounds, right? Like a bantamweight, to have that knockout power is very, very special. Something we don't see necessarily too often. Now, I will mention that, Font kind of did the same thing, right? Font was able to kind of establish dominance in that fight against Yanez, throw the jabs very cleanly, kind of do the same thing to Yanez in terms of timing that jab and able to get the knockout win. I think what I saw in that was Font was able to make the fight less technical. I think Yanez is more technical than people give him credit for. And what Font did was push him up against the cage and then make the exchanges a bit more messy. Bring him into the middle of the octagon, put the pressure on him so that it was a bit more frantic, a bit more panic mode from Yanez, just throwing off pure instinct to try and get Font to back away from him, trying to get that respect, trying to create more distance and range between the two, create the 50-50 exchanges, and then Font in those 50-50 exchanges absolutely put Yanez light out cold. And, to be honest, it's not a big blemish on a career to lose to Rob Font because he's an absolute beast and somebody that, at the end of the day, you can afford to lose to in terms of having a loss on your resume if you have to. Now, Adrian Yanez is 1-2 in his last 3. But if you look further out, he's only got 2 losses, and I think it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So in his last 13 fights, I think he has 11 wins. So this is a guy who's elite, still top of the division, in my opinion, at bantamweight, and is coming in against an undefeated Daniel Marcos. Now, Daniel Marcos is a guy that I actually haven't watched too much, and it's a real shame coming to this prediction that I haven't been able to watch his fights. But this is a guy who's been in the UFC for a while now. I mean, he came in on Dana White's Contender Series in 2022 and since has put together a very impressive 5-fight win streak. Sorry, he's on a 16-fight win streak, but 5 fights under what I would consider the UFC brand. And, unbelievable talent this guy is. I think about what I have seen was that Solomon Oliveira finish. And similarly to what Rob Font did to Adrian Yanez, got him up against the cage and just detonated on him, got the finish, knocked Solomon Oliveira out. So what do I really think? What do I really believe is going to happen in this fight? It's hard to go against Adrian Yanez when you've watched so many of his fights, when you're a big fan of somebody and kind of study their game and how effective they are. I don't believe, that Daniel Marcos has fought anyone on the level of Adrian Yanez yet in his career. So this is a really hard fight for me to predict. I haven't been able to analyze, Daniel Marcos's game in the manner I would like, the manner I do with a lot of these fights that I predict for you guys. But I do believe that Adrian Yanez is going to be able to come out and get this victory. Now, I believe that Marcos is a really good bantamweight. He's young. He's 31. I believe they're both 31. And, I'm just very, very excited for this fight. I believe it could be fight of the night. And I believe we're going to see a finish, regardless of either way it goes. So for me, I'm going to predict Adrian Yanez, but I completely understand if Daniel Marcos wins this fight. As you guys know, this podcast is not about getting these things necessarily correct. It's about creating discussion. It's about trying to go through these fights diligently, with discipline, with love for the game, focus on the athletes. But I'm going to go for Adrian Yanez by KO. What a prediction that is. Jesus. Now, in the co-main event, I just wanted to touch on this because for me, this is an absolute legend of the sport in Cub Swanson. I love watching Cub fight. He's probably one of the most fan-friendly styles in the UFC. And to see him back in the co-main event, it's just wonderful to see. I think we had a co-main event dropout with Mackenzie Dern, I believe, and Amanda Huas. But, this is a guy who, at age 41 is still able to put the gloves on and still get in there and compete at an elite level. The most recent performance that I think of in terms of Cub Swanson is that Daniel Pineda KO. And that was just a beautiful performance. But the thing is with Cub Swanson, as has kind of been the case with his entire career, is that, not entire career, sorry, but his recent career, is that it's kind of been wins and losses, right? I think he took a split decision loss to Philly. He got a controversial win over Dawodu. I know a lot of people believe that Dawodu deserved to win that fight and got the unanimous decision. He lost to Jonathan Martinez, who's an elite fighter, no shame in that. But he's also beaten people in his career that are at the top of the game, and he's fought the best of the best. He fought Brian Ortega, Frankie Edgar, Renato Moicano, Shane Burgos, Giga Chikadze, a lot, Max Holloway, Jeremy Stevens, Dennis Silva, Dustin Poirier, Charles Oliveira, and he has wins. You have to remember, back in his day, this guy was elite, man. He has wins over Charles Oliveira, wins over Dustin Poirier, wins over Jeremy Stevens. This is a guy who been in there with Jose Aldo, Chad Mendes. I mean, look at the names on his resume. I'm just going through it right now. Jens Pulver. I mean, really, really great fights. And, he deserves all the respect in the world and all the opportunity to go out on top and try and get a win. I think he's fighting for this point in his career, just the love of the game, enjoyment. And yeah, maybe he can replicate that Daniel Pineda fight where obviously it was a bit of a slugfest, but Cub Swanson is a slugger. He's in there for war. He's in there to get absolute entertainment out of every moment he's in there. And I'm just hoping the best for him in terms of his health and just his enjoyment and ability to keep going in this game and keep himself safe in that respect. Now, Billy Quarantillo, this is a guy who obviously, is probably, in my opinion, favored in this matchup just insofar he's got the age on his side. He's got, I don't know, actually. I really don't know, and I'm going back and forth, and that's probably why I left this fight till last, to be honest, because he's also a guy who's been relatively inconsistent in terms of the results, not necessarily in terms of the performances, but, he's coming off a loss to Yusuf Salal by submission. He fought Damon Jackson. He fought Edson Barboza. I believe he lost by KO, but that's Edson Barboza we're talking about. But I remember watching his fight against Alexander Hernandez. Now, Alexander Hernandez is a guy that, was the next big thing and wasn't able, obviously, to necessarily reach the heights of his potential. But we've just seen a great performance by Alexander Hernandez recently. So he has the ability to knock out elite guys like Alexander Hernandez. And he himself has been in there with some elite guys like Edson Barboza, Shane Burgos as well. They have a shared opponent there. But if I'm going to go with my heart on this one, I'm going to go Cub Swanson to get a win. But I obviously wouldn't be surprised with Billy Quarantillo's ability to get the win here, especially coming in at 36, 5 years younger than Cub Swanson. A lot less fights, especially in the UFC. I think Billy Quarantillo came in 2019 on the Dana White Contender Series. So, hopefully the legend of the sport, Cub Swanson, can get the win. But, again, for either of these guys, I'm just wishing the best. Obviously, I don't necessarily care about being right. I just want these fighters to be healthy. I want these fighters to have fun. I want these fighters to feel fulfilled in their careers. And obviously, I want it to be entertaining for the fans and the media because, again, without these fighters, I wouldn't have anything to speak about at all. So that is going to be it for episode 10 of the Backseat Fighter podcast. I have a couple of announcements to make. Tomorrow is Cage Warriors 182 in San Diego, and I will be interviewing the Professor Xavier Vines, who is fighting on the main card there. An incredible stand-up fighter, really well-rounded, can switch stances, throws beautiful knees, kicks, leg kicks, elbow attacks, step-in elbows, very, very cool style. So please tune in on Monday to watch my interview with him after his fight tomorrow night. And Next week, I'll be interviewing Tuco Tokkos after his fight with Navajo Stirling, the ones that we just spoke about, opening up the main card this weekend at UFC Fight Night Tampa. Thank you guys so much. Please subscribe to the YouTube for more full episodes. It really helps the channel. Please like. I really, really appreciate all the support. If we can get the likes up, we can help grow this community and grow more more, healthy MMA debate and discussion. And of course, please, if you prefer to listen to the audio, head down to Spotify, where we have full audio episodes uploaded over there. Thank you guys so much for the support. Follow me on Instagram at the Backseat Fighter Pod, TikTok at the Backseat Fighter Pod as well. And of course, Twitter at Backseat Fighter. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys so much for watching on YouTube. And have a great day. Enjoy the fights this weekend. It's been Charlie Bins. Thank you for watching.